Presented to Canon D.J. Garland by the Greek community of Brisbane as a token of recognition of valued services rendered. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, by a Brisbane jeweller.
A first AF, former first AF gentleman, who was an artist in his own right in things to do with jewellery. Now, what I surmise is this is Queensland gold from Mount Morgan, and the rubies are from Rubyvale. Everything that the pectoral cross sits upon is made by Brisbane people by donations. It was literally put the hat around amongst the Greeks of Brisbane, and in the middle of a pretty ordinary post-World War I Brisbane as well.
I always find that clip invigorating and enlightening. It's delivered with such passion by Peter Collins, and I just thought it was a real suitable start to this podcast, which is about enticing you to explore the ANZAC Day Precinct YouTube channel playlists that relate to Canon Garland. And there are several, and they are really fascinating insights into the history and the work of Canon Garland and its effect upon Brisbane, Queensland and Australia. Such an impassioned man, and I think Peter Collins' passion reflects the passion that must have been embedded in Canon Garland. Anyway, please explore, please enjoy this podcast. I'm hoping that it doesn't jump from one topic to the other. It shouldn't. It should flow naturally and easily along. Thank you.
So this is my grandpa. This is Richard Ratcliff, my dad's dad, and he's our link to Canon Garland. So it was to Richard that the pectoral cross was bequeathed when Canon Garland died. And it's that journey that we've been on, bringing the cross back to Brisbane over the last few years with the help of Peter and with Dad. And I'm really lucky in our family to have this beautiful portrait of my grandpa, who looks down on us daily and just kind of reminds us, about, I see in his eyes, I see great kindness and I see great generosity of spirit, and that was the person that I remember. I was really close to my grandpa, and I learned a lot from him, and I tried to follow in his footsteps. He went to Oxford. I didn't make it to Oxford. Still a big source of pain 30 odd years on, but he was a person who, I think, in common with Canon Garland, was a great individual person, in that he spoke to individuals and he worked with individuals about building a sense of their own personal strength and their own sense of community. And he, wherever he went, in all the parishes that he worked in and served in, he built around him a great sense of positive feeling, which I, enjoyed seeing a little bit of. The journey around the cross has just been absolutely astonishing, because it was mind-blowing to come to Brisbane and to meet with the generosity of the people who are remembering Canon Garland's amazing legacy, and to learn much more about him, and to find so many people who have put so much of themselves into recognising what he achieved and what he wanted to establish. And it's been a great honour to meet Peter Collins. Hello, Peter.
I mean, what is so good for me, what fascinates me about what's in that little pile of stuff, is that there are a couple of photographs, and like all photographs, you have to be a bit of a detective, and so you're looking at the photograph and getting stuff from it. You've got some facts about it, but the context of it you can develop yourself, and I hope that happens with those three. But the two letters that are written from David Garland to my father, are both instrumental. A time in world history where the British monarchy was in such a terrible situation with the abdication of the king, and the new king coming along, and the coronation and all of the things that go with that, and the way in which David Garland sort of espoused that right at the very end of his ministry with the same kind of enthusiasm you'd expect if somebody is 19 or called Peter Collins. It was that sort of same commitment to things, and I hope that you get a huge amount of enjoyment and fun out of reading those and reading them, but reading also between the lines of what they.
It's a wonderful day, Peter. It's been a long journey. It's been a few times there we thought it wouldn't come off, but since 2019, on the 80th anniversary of the passing of Canon Garland, we named yonder overpass Canon Garland Overpass, and there was a plaque presented and blessed, sort of, and it sits there in the footpath onto the Canon Garland Overpass. And today, somewhere this morning, probably before dawn, the Canon Garland Overpass signage finally made it onto the side of the bridge, so that all who travel on the Western Freeway to the west and to the east will now know of this man's name.
It is quite incredible. Quite incredible.
But Wilfrid's monks, the founder of the abbey, were a much more sort of rough and ready group of people who seriously just wanted to be out of the rest of the world and on their own to concentrate their thinking on God.
Couldn't really ask for more of a historic and memorable location to talk in relation to Canon Garland. Now, we were just talking a little while ago, and you've actually got an original letter from Canon Garland to your father.
I have, yes.
If you just want to just give us just a little feel, yes. I just think that would add greatly to the discourse.
Yeah, I think. May I read some of it?
Yes.
So this is a letter written from PO Box 47A, GPO Brisbane, in October 1936, which of course was a year of huge change because of the abdication of the king, and that's mentioned within it here. And we have to remember that this was written in 1936, October, when Canon David Garland was 72 and still at St Barnabas in Red Hill. So this is what he writes. Your letter of the 16th September arrived on the 20th instant. That says something about speed of travel from one place to another. I'm sorry to have been too busy since then to reply. And of course you understand that I'm not working full-time any longer. Okay, well, we'll hear about what full-time means in a moment. Thank you for your donation for our church news, which quite thrills me. When you see it acknowledged, you will notice that the sea air has increased it from your 10 shillings to 12 shillings and sixpence. So he's made a donation which has already increased in value. So my father was a young priest at the parish of St Matthew's Church in Westminster, fairly close to the Houses of Parliament, but in a fairly tough area of London. So I'm glad to hear of your year at St Matthew's, and I'm confident that under the present regime it will come back to its old reputation. This is a priest in Australia who is aware enough of what the parish in London is doing and how it's probably fallen a little bit flat and is beginning to raise itself up again. That's quite remarkable. Your mother writes me wonderful letters, though too few, but I'm not complaining, as it's very good of her to write at all. Of course, I realise that her health is very weak. October 1936. His sister, my grandmother, who was very weak in health as early as 1936, lived with us in our family, where we lived together as a family, and died in 1959. So she did remarkably well to keep going for a further 20 years.
So she was well into her 90s then?
She was 1871 was she born, died 1959, 80s.
Oh. Yeah.
You'll be interested to hear about last Sunday. In church by 6:30 for celebration and sermon, full congregation, then to a daughter church for the same at 9 o'clock. Then into the city for a junior Red Cross service at the ANZAC Memorial at 10:30. This preventing me looking after 3 Sunday schools. 11 o'clock, baptism, churching and sermon when my colleague celebrated. 5 p.m, parochial council. 6 p.m, men's quarterly tea. 7:30, evensong and sermon. Not bad for a septuagenarian, and none the worse on Monday.
And that's what he writes in the letter.
That's what he writes in the letter.
Yeah.
Which is extraordinary, really, that somebody at 72 in a big city like Brisbane is running across the city to do various bits and pieces in various different places. He talks a little bit about his son, who lived there and was a bridge engineer, and his grandson, who at that time was age 9. And I can just imagine how the order went out to Brisbane to say, we're going to celebrate the coronation. Who can we get to be the person who will ensure that this is done properly? There's a man here, Canon David Garland, who will ensure that. And so I've got a couple of little extracts from this letter which show the role that he played. Our coronation celebrations in Queensland were all that I would wish them to be. Whoa, it passes muster. The government set up a committee with the Minister of the Crown as chairman, and his comment afterwards that I had got everything done in the way I wanted, which meant also that the government wanted it in the same way. I love that, that he had the idea, but that the government could claim to be the ones who thought it was a good idea after it had happened. And the connection between my father, who was doing a similar job in Westminster in London, and him was interesting. So they shared satisfaction that the process had gone well, that the celebrations had gone well in December 1936. Also in the letter it records that David Garland had been ill. Thanks for your inquiry after my health. I had another bad attack a few months ago and was not expected to recover by morning. But when morning came, I laughed at the doctor, and after a fortnight's rest got about again, including presiding over the synod in committee as chairman. It's distinctly a strain, and I get very tired every day. Now, if you remember the last letter, he told us what he did on a Sunday when he was just the mere age of 72, and it was extraordinary. Here he is saying that he's had to slow down a little bit, but he continued in his work for 2 years following the writing of this letter, so he clearly had made a significant enough recovery to continue his work.
And Peter Collins, we've actually come outside, and I can assure you it's about 3 degrees and it is cold. There's David, and it is just beautiful, the outside of this abbey at Hexham. And David, you're just going to do a little bit of a discussion about the outside. However, most important, we are now going to talk about Roy Garland and a connection, very much Queensland connection to the Irish in the form of Chuck Feeney.
We're standing outside Hexham Abbey, and on the stonework behind me you can see part of the oldest part of the building which is still standing from about the 12th century. This is an area which of course was built as a monastery, and the monasteries were strong, powerful places, controlled most of Hexham, and were the target of Henry VIII's wish to increase his revenues by disestablishing the church and creating the Church of England. So by doing so, creating the separation between Protestants and Catholics. Now that divide of course is something which has been felt seriously over much of our country at different times in our history, but in particular in the area of Ireland, where Catholics and Protestants have had a long period of argumentative history. That is most prominent in the Northern Ireland area, and it has caused the troubles that happened in the 1970s particularly, and there are many people who have wanted to try to overcome those differences and to find a way forward for that province. Roy Garland, my fourth cousin, is one of those. He has given his long life to working to bring peace in that province, and has worked with various organisations. He himself was a teacher of religion, and he wanted to put the record straight, if you like, about how religion should not be held responsible for the divides which have happened there. and has worked with a group of people to try to make that happen, contributed to the Good Friday Agreement. Now what's the connection here is that I've learned from Peter about Chuck Thynne and his huge involvement, another Ulsterman, also committed to that, to finding ways and using his skills and his resources to be able to do that. I don't know this yet, but I shall research it, that Roy Garland and Chuck Thynne have come across each other in the past, a connection there which they probably have not realised, but one which is no doubt a way of linking something that's happening back to Canon Garland too.
Over in Hexham, at the Hexham Abbey, and David, you are just going to tell us just a little bit about this beautiful chair and the history to that.
Yep. This is St Wilfrid's stone that he used when he was the Bishop of Hexham. He had this carved, prepared for him to represent the fact that Hexham was the place. And his church, which he built here in AD 674, contained this stone, and the other part of the abbey, which is still part of what Wilfrid built, is a crypt which is below where we're standing now. But this stone represents the fact that this was a bishop's place, and that he founded something which he wanted to last for hundreds of years. And although the building around us is not his building, the building he built was in stone, which was unusual. For a while, people had a vision of this place as being the finest building north of the Alps as a church building, which is extraordinary for a small place, as Peter's already mentioned, a small place like Hexham. So this represents episcopal authority. It also represents, for a time, sanctuary, because this was the place within the abbey where people who had been accused of a crime or had fallen out with their neighbours could run to the church, come to the seat and claim sanctuary. And for a period of 40 days, nobody was allowed to touch them. Nobody was allowed to arrest them or beat them up or fine them or anything until they had worked through whatever issues there were to do with sanctuary. So this place was sanctuary, and the old name for that was Frith. To claim sanctuary was Frith, and this is called for us here the Frith Stool. Okay, here we have, we're down in the crypt of Hexham Abbey, in an area which is Anglo-Saxon, or all the stonework down here is built by Anglo-Saxons. But like all people, they would try to find the best supply of stone that they could, and if they could find some that had already been cut, they would use that. So if they could find a Roman villa or a bridge or Hadrian's Wall, which had stones that they could raid, they raided them. And there are a number of stones around here which are like that, including this one above my head, which is a stone which marks an interesting story from the Emperor Septimus Severus, who wished at his death to leave the empire to his two sons. When he died, he made out the stone recording the fact that the empire had been left to his two sons. You can guess what happens when two sons share the responsibility of leadership. They didn't get on, and to the extent that one killed the other, and then had his name, the dead one's name, effaced from every stone on which his name happened, so that not only had he killed him, he'd killed evidence of him forever and ever. Now this stone is not here for a historic purpose, only because it's a good stone to use to build the ceiling, but that is what has been used here. But the rest of this place is Wilfrid, his church, the crypt of his church, built probably to attract pilgrims to come and worship here. Not because Wilfrid wanted to exalt himself, but he wanted people to come to Christ through the visit that they made to this place. And the whole of the crypt set out is there to allow people to have an opportunity to see what was special in that space. Probably relics, maybe picked up from his visits. He made 3 visits to Rome, and probably picked up, certainly the idea picked up, and probably the bones themselves picked up, probably of St. Andrew, one of Jesus' disciples, because this church is dedicated, always has been dedicated, to St. Andrew.
And while we may have appeared to stray a smidgen from Canon Garland, in actual fact, the lesson, I think, is very well applied to the work that Canon Garland did in the way that he tried to cement ANZAC Day into our psyche and into our day-to-day living.
Yeah, a similar thrust of what he wanted to do
Exactly.
in terms of attracting other people.
And with that, we'll finish off here. Thank you so much, David.